Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's just about 1 o'clock. My name's Simon Ward. Welcome to How to Write Effective CVs with myself and Becky Webber. This is a part of the Next Steps Best on the Web masterclass series. I'm really grateful that you've found the time to come and join us. I hope the next hour or so will be practical, full of actionable advice. We're very keen to make sure that you take stuff away from the next hour that you'll be able to apply to either a CV that is already in existence and you're polishing, or when you start to sit down and write your CV. As I say, we're really lucky to have Becky Webber with us. Becky and I did a session way back in August. I can't believe how quickly time
Oh,
has
I know.
gone. I, I, I think I may have had hair, I don't know, but it seems a long time. Um, we're going to go through this next hour looking at three of the myths that I believe are debilitating when it comes to people believing in their own ability to write a CV. So we're going to look at whether your CV is really read in 6 seconds or not, whether your CV has to be limited to 2 pages or not, and we're going to look at that whole area of the ATS compliant CV. Um, the most important thing about today is that this is a session for you. It's your session. Um, so ask questions when they come to mind. The best time always to ask a question is when you think of it. I'm going to be monitoring this is dubious. I'm going to be monitoring the chat. So God knows what's going to happen there, but I'm going to be monitoring the chat. I'll be looking at questions. So now, guys, if you can hear me, just to put my mind at rest a little bit, if you could just give me a thumbs up. Loads and loads of people saying me that they couldn't hear me. I apologise. Yes, there was no sound. I could hear myself. It was the best introduction I've ever done to a session like this. At least that's what I'm going to stick by anyway. So thanks. I'm glad you're all here. If you can just hear me, just chuck up a quick thumbs up so that I know that I'm still talking. Becky, rather than me talking about people, talking about you, two people, just give us a little introduction about yourself.
Sure. Well, hopefully they can hear us because I can see Richard in the chat's put gone again. So I'm hoping nobody else is, we're just silent.
Yeah.
So my name, as you can see, is Becky Webber. So I've worked in recruitment for over 20 years. And 4 years ago, as a result of feeling concerned, oh, we got a thumbs up, that's good, a concern about evolving technology and hiring behaviours, my biggest concern was that job seekers weren't educated enough to bring their best version of themselves to employers. So consequently, employers were missing out on fabulous talent, and also job seekers were missing out on opportunities to secure jobs that they would enjoy and feel passionate about. So overnight, not with any business plan or anything like that, because it was a bit more of a service and a passion, I created Positive Career Advice, which was a Facebook page, and has now evolved into a website that I created. So here's a hint. Don't forget when you're talking about your value adding sort of attributes, to consider extracurricular ones as well, not just the ones that you create in the workplace or academia as well. So I created a website from scratch, which is positivecareeradvice.com, and on there my purpose, along with all the webinars that I run free of charge for job seekers, is to research and share guides, videos, templates that job seekers can use to enable them to present the best version of themselves to prospective employers. So it's all about education. I can't do it all on my own. There's a lot of other people doing wonderful work out there as well, but it's a real passion of mine, and something that I really care about.
And you play down the effect and the relevance of your webinars with over 1,700 job hunters having attended your webinars on Eventbrite last year. Becky has been a guiding light for, I think, all of the other people who sit in seats like mine, career coaches and job search coaches. She's gone out there and she has paid it forward now for 2 years, the Positive Career Advice website is probably quite simply the best resource of free job hunting advice that there is on the web. And I would suggest that you all go and check it out and have a look. It's a lot of hard work that Becky's put into it. And it's constantly evolving. I think that's the important thing, isn't it? That it hasn't just sat there. You didn't just put one template up and leave it. It's moved with the times.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's a lot of the content was on there over the course of those 4 years, and it's quieted down slightly, but it's evolving now with partnerships with charities and organisations that can extend the support that I can offer, being that I'm only one person, which is always a bit of a challenge. So there are other organisations that I've obviously been networking with that feature on my website that offer discounted mental health training, NLP training, free career coaching, and all sorts of different things, not just for the more experienced job seeker, but also for people that are very new into their careers as well. So I've got a whole section on early careers as well, and work with the and have written guides for the youth group, which is Jack Parsons' organisation, who spends a lot of time with the government talking about getting young people into work, which is a bit of a challenge as well.
Yeah.
Or it has been over the last couple of years with COVID. So, yeah, I love it. I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it. And I think anyone that has attended my webinars could probably tell I do love it because I kind of come alive on there.
Let's jump straight into the basics of CV writing. I
Yeah.
think that there will be a number of people on today's call who are sitting down, possibly for the first time, people transitioning out of the military service, went in straight from school, went through an assessment process for the Army, Navy, or Air Force. Some 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years later, they now find themselves in need of a CV for the first time. They've heard a lot about CVs. There's a load of stuff flying out there. Where do they start, Becky?
Good question. Creating a CV, let's be honest, is not an easy task. I mean, I'm been in recruitment for 20 plus years. Prior to me creating my webinars, I hadn't had need to really write a CV, so I thought it would be a good practice for me to go through the pain of writing a CV, and that's me being candid and honest. So it is hard, but how can we make it easier? One of the biggest lessons that I think I learned when I was creating my CV, because I was on about version 5, I was showing it to my sister, and she was like, "This still isn't you, Becky. This still isn't you." And the lesson that I learned is that I was trying to cover all the bases. I was writing it in the mindset of this is me and this is what I've got to offer. No, we don't write it like that. We write it in the mindset of what is it that the employer wants to see? What value can I bring to them? Just like you were in marketing, no good marketer would write, this is our product and this is what we have to offer. It's through the eyes and through the lens of the person that will be on the receiving end of it. What's in it for them? What value do they want? What problems do they have? What pain points can I help them to solve? So that's important. But one of the most important things at the beginning is understanding what you truly want. So when I look at a CV for the first time, one of the questions I ask in my head is it clear to me that what role this person is looking for? Because the phrase is, if we try to appeal to everyone, we'll end up appealing to no one.
Yeah.
And the danger that we have when we create our CV potentially for the first time or even for the 20th time, we still can fall into this trap of thinking, well, if I don't include that bit, that could be the absolute golden nugget that the employer is looking for.
Mm.
But the chances are, I mean, they're never going to read it all. Let's be honest, they never read a CV from top to bottom. So what we need to do is summarize the key points that through our research and homework that we've done, they want to see. And then the interview is the place where you go into more detail. One of the common mistakes that many job seekers make is trying to include their life story, creating a monologue of a document, which, if you think about your own behaviors, is incredibly off putting when you're created with a very wordy document that someone's got to try and navigate their way through to get those key bits of information. So it's a summary document. But there's what we tend to do is also we try, because we're so keen to find work, we launch ourselves straight onto the internet and we start going apply, 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 apply. And we wonder why we're not getting much of a response, or we're getting rejection, which obviously affects how we feel in our heads and our mindset, the first step we need to take is to really understand what it is that we want. The type of, and that's reflective, self reflection, introspection, of understanding where we thrived before, the key things that we enjoy, our strengths, the values that we bring, the problems that we've solved, our values, our purpose. It does take time to do that. It's quite hard to do that initially. But if we don't do that, we're going to be scattergunning all over the place. So that's the first stage. And that's before you put pen to paper, I would say. So a bit of a
I,
roundabout way of
no, no,
describing it.
I think it's really, really important. And I think one of the errors that we see in that first draft, as you say, people put everything in because they don't know, they haven't worked out yet what their key messages are. They
Yeah.
haven't done their elevator pitch. They don't know what they're selling. So they don't know, therefore, what the customer is looking for. And a generic guiding principle is just don't write about things you don't want to do. The number of times that I see of CV where people have taken up half a page on a rock, particularly in today's market, where people are pivoting from one career to another, doing different things. When you are looking to sell a solution to a hiring manager's problem, solve the problem that he or she has got. Don't solve a problem that you solved 3 years ago doing something else. So if you don't want to be an accountant anymore, don't take up a lot of the real estate on your resume talking about the days you were an accountant.
Yeah.
Talk about the marketing experience you have, if that's where your career is going now, or whatever it is. And I think that just helps begin to negate that need to just put everything down. So just don't write about things that you don't want to ever do again, and also use numbers. That cuts volume down as well. When if a picture paints 1,000 words, numbers can certainly paint a few hundred as well. So,
Yeah.
so I think getting those evidential data, that number is important. In terms of format, so someone is sitting down, because I'm an old bloke, I was going to say a blank piece of paper. When did anyone last sit down with a blank piece of paper? Someone is sitting down with a blank computer screen with some bald bloke, seems to be talking, but there's no noise coming out of it because he's made up sound, and they're about to write their CV. The first decision, I guess, is how am I going to format this? Where am I going to put information? What's your advice around formatting?
Well, there are a few examples on my website you can download as Word documents. We've got to remember that CVs are very subjective, first and foremost. So what my preference is might not be what the next person preference is, but I think the key message is about making it easy to navigate. So I spent some time over sort of the end of last year, beginning of this year, putting together a sort of a slightly revised format to try and inject some personality, which is a lot of people struggle to do, into a CV. So I think I would urge people to look at the formats on my website. You have, I think, you have your chronological CV, which tends to be the preferred option, where you're talking about your career history from most recent to past. But as you quite rightly said, what we don't want to do is labour on the jobs that we don't want to do anymore. So if you're looking to change career or evolve your career, then obviously there's an alternative way that you can still keep the chronological format of your CV, but also highlight the transferable skills and the value that you can bring. So you'll see there's two variations of CVs. One is the pure chronological one, and the other one is really highlighting those transferable skills, which mirror the keywords potentially that might be included in a job advertisement. But in simple terms, it's your name, where you live, but obviously don't give your full personal data away. Always include your LinkedIn profile. Make sure that marries with your CV in terms of dates, employers, job titles. Use generic job titles within your CV and in your LinkedIn profile so that you're more searchable online rather than using any sort of fandangled super duper new modern job descriptions with the word evangelist in them or something like that, because that's not what you would search for if you were looking for a job. You'd search for a marketing manager role. Make sure you use bullet points. I think you had a really good video out. I think it was a post actually you put out this week about bullet points, because that's easy for our eyes to move around and find key information. If necessary, put a key skills area. Certainly highlight the accomplishments, but maybe select 5, 6 maximum. Odd numbers are always a good one. I would say 5 accomplishments that obviously are most valuable, that you want to demonstrate to a prospective employer, and make sure your CV is full of value adding, where you add value rather than a cut and paste of a job description, which won't let you make you stand out from the crowd. I say you have a look on my website, positivecareeradvice.com. It's probably easier to see it. But yeah, a profile at the top as well, which make sure it has some personality in it and what you care about.
Yeah.
A lot of CVs that we see, and it's very hard not to make it like this. So I have complete empathy, but they're so professional and so corporate. I said to you before the call, didn't I,
Yeah.
Simon, that I was talking to someone earlier this week, and I used the analogy of the game of pairs, with the cards, matching the cards together. And my question to her was, now you've described more about you as a person. If I had your CV by the side, would I put the two together? Would I be able to see that's you? And she went, absolutely not. Which is so. One of the improvements on the formatted CVs that I've got on my website has also got some sort of statements in there that kind of can bring out more about what you care about as well, which I'm sure you'll be able to see if you hop onto the website. So
I'm just going to go to Daniel's question, because it's a question that since I've started working quite a bit of my time now with either people going through transition out of the armed forces or with veterans. It's a question that comes up all the time. Civify, I'm glad you've sorted out how you spell that for me, Daniel. I often wondered how you spell Civify, but you're absolutely right. My thoughts, and I'll ask Becky on her thoughts too, my thoughts on paying someone to write your CV. Now, there may be CV writers on this call. There may be people who watch the recorded version of this call. So I kind of apologize in advance because I'm just about to trash your industry. I'm not a great fan of people writing an individual CV for you. There are some really great CV writers out there. They're very good and they do good stuff. So I'm not criticizing their capability. What I'm concerned about is the value of a single CV with no background work done with you to give you the skills to take that base document and tailor it every time you update it when you need to. So the work that we do at the Jobs Lab is very much about creating a base CV. Then from that, you'd create your generic CV, which is the CV you put onto job boards or send to agencies when there's not a specific role. And then you tailor your CV for a specific role. And that's when that slightly longer CV can be shortened and focused. I think that CV writers, some of them create great CVs, some of them really don't. And I've seen a few of those. But I very much come from the don't teach a person don't give a person a fish, teach them to go fishing. And writing a CV is a life skill. The Civify issue is a really, really important one, Daniel. We talk about the multilingual lever. For a period in your life now, you are going to have to write and talk in your army language, but also in Civvy Street. And it's really important that you are aware of those two languages and you use Civvy Street language in documentation and communications relevant to Civvy Street, whilst not forgetting that you've still got 6 months, a year, or whatever to serve in the army, and that army is that army language is very important. I'd love to sit down with you, Daniel, have a chat, and I think we can put in place some basic rules and guidance that will make you more comfortable with writing your CV. It is not as complex, it is not as challenging as some of the stuff that I see in the media would suggest. If you think of the stuff that you have written and read during your army career, I'm pretty sure you have written and read things more complex than CVs. And I'm sure you are more than capable of writing them. You just need to know what the rules are. You just need to know what the guidance is. Becky's already talked about structure and the mindset behind creating a CV. Once you've got that, you're halfway there. And there is no such thing as the perfect CV. which is slightly embarrassing. I think once wrote a book called The Perfect CV, but there isn't. There is no
My
such thing.
webinar is called How to Create the Perfect CV, but it is tongue in cheek.
Yeah,
So
we kind of fall into that belief, and we start beating ourselves up with really big sticks that my CV isn't perfect. A CV that is perfect for one person reading it, whether that's a recruiter or a hiring manager, may not be perfect for the person they then pass it to. And you just have to do your best, listen to feedback, talk to people, but most important, develop the skills to do it yourself, because every application should be different. And particularly when you come out of the army, if you look at the record of employment of people leaving the army over a long period of time, they tend to go through 2 or 3 roles in that first 5 years. So you're going to be applying for a role again. And are you going to go back and ask someone to rewrite that CV? It becomes a very, very expensive pastime. It's a life skill. It's learnable. I wasn't born able to write CVs. I've just learned it along the way by reading a lot of CVs and talking to a lot of hiring managers and HR people. You can learn the skills too. If I can, anyone can. It's not that complex. Would be my view. In terms of stuff like font and photographs on CVs and using italics or bold or different size font. What are your feelings about how the visual of a CV should look, Becky?
I think it's depending. Again, I'm going to say this with a bit of a caveat because I learned this. I've learned to adapt my webinars and my content based upon what I learned from job seekers and their experiences. So I learned early on in my webinars, because I would say don't put a photograph on the CV. In the UK and the States, it's frowned upon, and obviously it can create bias as well, and we want to be judged upon based upon our capability and our potential rather than how we look. And obviously we don't, we're trying to encourage inclusion as well. So, but there are certain nationalities and countries that expect you to put a photograph on a CV. Scandinavia is one in question. So I think it's about educating yourself on obviously where you are, because I don't know obviously where people are calling in from. Understand what's important in your demographic in your country that you're wishing to work within. So, but generally in the UK and the States and many other countries, a photograph would be a no-no. Again, this is my advice, not necessarily saying that it's correct. It's based upon preference. I don't have any problems with using bold. I don't have any problems with people using italics to express a point or to make something stand out. I don't have any problems with anyone using a different colour, provided it's not offending my eyes with a rainbow of colours. It still needs to look, it needs to represent you. And if you're going for a type of a professional role, then obviously you want it to look professional. So I've just seemed to have, hold on a second. Um, yeah, there we go. Sorry, my screen suddenly changed and I couldn't see you. See, it's happening my end as well, but I'm still here.
I'm
Um,
going to blame technology, not us.
absolutely. So yeah, formatting, you have to be careful with not because your CV is going to be rejected by an applicant tracking system, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, very shortly. But that's the portals that you would apply for a job online through some organisations and recruitment firms. But just be careful. You can use tab functions instead of tables and all that sort of thing, just to avoid falling foul of those. But if you're applying for a job directly with the line manager and you're emailing them, then you can be a little bit more adventurous with your CV, particularly if you're in marketing and you want to demonstrate your creative side, which is understandable. Then you could have different styles of CVs to suit the audience, but it's all about the audience, and that's my point, I would say,
Yeah,
with that.
and I'm picking up on Robbie's point. I think pictures. There's an awful
Yes.
lot of data out there about pictures and CVs feeding
Yeah.
into unconscious and unconscious bias, and we have to be careful of that. Although I have to say, and I'll just say it's not necessarily that relevant. I'm always confused. I agree with you completely. I think in the UK and in the States, photographs on CVs just don't exist. But can you imagine putting up a LinkedIn profile without a photograph?
But
Um,
there's a reason for that. And I've thought about that because someone said, well, what? You got a photograph on your LinkedIn profile. What's the difference? But it's a different audience. You're
yeah,
applying for a specific job. So if you've got a picture on your CV, you're in a small audience, a pool of people, and opinions are being formed based upon a particular job. Whereas on LinkedIn, a photograph on your LinkedIn profile, if you haven't got one, like you say, it's the worst thing you can do, because actually your picture builds trust.
Yeah.
Is well, you've got a smile on your picture to be welcoming, so that you're approachable. So it's got a different purpose because of
Yeah.
where it's placed.
Yeah.
And I think,
And that word is really important. I think going back to purpose. So a lot of people write a CV because they're going to write a CV, or they've got a LinkedIn profile because someone's told them they ought to have a LinkedIn profile. We have to be very clear on what the purpose of each document, each communication is in an interview or a recruitment process. So everything has its purpose. The example I would use is probably a cover letter. The job of a cover letter is not to get you an interview. The job of a cover letter is to get your CV read.
mhm,
The job of a CV is to get a first interview. A first interview's job is to get a second, etc., etc. You're not going to get a job because of your CV or your cover letter. You're going to get an interview because of
yes,
your CV, and that's its purpose. And the point that Becky made earlier about, if you're going to write chapter and verse and you have a sort of war and peace of your CV, A, no one's going to read it, and B, what have you got left to talk about in the interview? That is a problem. But as you've brought them up, and it is a subject that gained a lot of momentum last year, not so much this year, is this issue of ATS compliant CVs and what an ATS, applicant tracking systems, are, what they do, how important it is that you have to. I mean, I've seen some suggestions that if you are going to apply to a large organisation where they're using an applicant tracking system, so a large FTSE company, for example, you would put in ATS compliancy, which is fundamentally a bunch of a big block of text, has all the SEOs in it, and it just looks horrible. What are your thoughts, Becky?
yeah, don't do that. It's what my thought is. Okay. My goodness me, applicant tracking systems. It's kind of like a stuck record, isn't it? It feels like a stuck old record that just won't stop playing. Um, so first and foremost, do not fear them. They're not there to cause problems or be barriers. I did my own research, and again, you can read my research in my blogs on my website and also on my articles on LinkedIn. And Russell Ailes has done on LinkedIn has done. He's a recruiter. He does write CVs and he does support people through their job search journey as well, but he's also done his own separate analysis as well. So I'd urge anyone to read through the research, because just by reading that, you will become more knowledgeable, and you need to know. So they're not to be feared. There's only two reasons why a CV will be rejected by a bot, which is basically the myth that surrounds applicant tracking systems. And that's if your CV is too big, probably with too many pictures and graphics, and the other one is if it sees it as an image. And that's the only reason. Those are the only two reasons. Everything else is controlled by humans. Their instructions, even though obviously it's technology that's enabling that. But an applicant tracking system, for those that don't know, is like an online filing system. It is a portal where people can apply for jobs, and it's an online system where organisations can manage their own hiring process, from CVs received to interviews to offer to rejection. And it's a database for that. Um, so my simple advice through the research I've done is just play the cautious card with how you format your CVs. And again, the guides that I've created, or the research will show you that. But it's basically avoid tables, headers, footers, just because some of the text within those areas of a CV might not be read by technology. And that's just because some systems don't do it. And a lot of systems do, but legacy systems might not. And you don't know which system they're using. So it's better to play the safe card. The most important thing is keywords.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, let's reverse this. When you're looking for a job, you will type into Google search the type of job you will be looking for, which will include a standardized job title. Therefore, use standardized job titles in your CV, because they will be using keywords as well to find you. Um, so all you're doing is mirror. What you need to do is mirror the language in the job advertisement in your CV, which is why it's so important to tailor your CV when you apply. That doesn't have to be a laborious job, not at all. It might just be moving some bullet points around, just changing a bit of the language that you might choose to use so it mirrors theirs. And then if they're using keywords to go through a big list of candidates, I'll be honest, because it's a candidate short market, I would say those lists have reduced. The likelihood is most recruiters will be looking through every application that applies rather than using technology to sift through them. But if they are, then obviously you want to make sure that you're found for those keywords, because the hiring manager will be using, I want an administrator with PowerPoint and Excel. So those might be the hard skills they'll use as keywords. And if you haven't got them on your CV, then you won't feature highly on that shortlist. And that's why it's important. So that would be a key point. But basically, they're not really scary, are they, Simon?
No.
I mean, you've worked with them probably more than I have. They're an enabler, not a disabler. So,
And I do think it, as you say, it's a stuck record, and it's a stuck record that I think is introduced to the market to create a little bit of concern and make what people like me do look even cleverer than it is. Well, it's not. They're not that difficult. There are those basic rules, as Becky says, avoid tables, and that's really clear format. Also try to, and you should anyway, maintain a single font right the way through your document. That has some impact as well on the way that it can be read, but it's negligible. But there is no point in an ATS compliant CV flying through an ATS so it gets passed on to a human being who looks at it and goes, well, I'm not talking to them. You have
you
to.
bore them within the first few seconds with all your big text.
Absolutely, yeah, and we talk about. It's got to get through the AHB, the actual human being, because that's where your job is going to come from. I mean, I think the year before last, Barclays were the first people to actually hire people without any human interaction at all, which I found was absolutely terrifying. That isn't where the market's going. In fact, the pandemic has made it easier in some ways for us to have, through technology, some level of human contact. You're going to be talking with individuals. I still think the look and feel, or the look, you don't feel it necessarily, but the look of a CV is such a big, has a huge part to play in whether people commit that time to read your CV. The point that I think we're all in a better place now in some ways if we're looking for work, because we're not having the 200, 300 applications per role that at some points last year was the case. I also think that in applicant tracking systems, that they're only a computer. They can't apply. They're not. People talk about AI. I've worked in a couple of organisations that do really advanced AI. ATS don't have really advanced AI yet. Largely, the whole, and Becky and I were saying earlier that there is this amorphous mass, the applicant tracking system, as if it's one being. They're all different. The most important thing is that you get through the next sift as well. So a clear, clean, well formatted, well thought out, fact based CV that makes your case, but also allows your personality to shine through. Will get through an ATS quite happily as well. So that's one of those myths about that I do think make people think, God, it's got to be compliant with ATS. I better get a professional to help. It makes no sense to me.
That's one of the reasons I did my research, because I could see people marketing CV writing services and showing examples of this horrendously keyword saturated CV for not far off £1,000 for the service. And I just thought, if I were looked at that CV, just as you pointed out at the beginning, I wouldn't give it a second glance, because it's playing the system. For starters, I want to know who you are. I want to know, I'm hiring a human being, not a machine. So I want to make sure you fit into my team. Culturally, you're going to fit. And I want to know about you as a person. So absolutely. But yeah, don't be scared of them. Just educate yourself around them. That's all.
It's good of you to mention Russell as well. Russ is going to come on, and he's doing one of the Best on the Web mastermind. He's going to do next week, but it's actually going to fade back a couple of weeks. But because he's in Australia, it's going to be an 8 o'clock at night job, so that he's actually conscious. Yep. But it'll be great. And I really strongly recommend have a look at the research Becky has done. Have a look at the research that Russell has done. It's not a coincidence that Becky and Russell are both guests on this Best on the Web series. We really like people who are beyond just pure opinion and gut feel, and Becky does the work, and it's there and it's evident on her website, and that's really important. There is a lot of gut feel around hiring. I know that. I'm not pretending there isn't, but where there is the possibility to do some research, get some numbers, look at the data, understand how people think and behave, it really helps. Length of CV, Becky. What's your thinking about length of CV?
Whenever I ask this question on my webinar, do you know what answer I get? 2 pages. I mean, that isn't a wrong answer, don't get me wrong, but it's like anything, if we read it often enough, we believe it to be true. It needs to be as long as it needs to be to convey the message that you need to give. That's not too long that you're going to send someone to sleep and for them to find it difficult to get to the key information they need to see to invite you to interview, which, as you quite rightly said, is the whole purpose of a CV, but not too short, not to give enough information that people just go, well, that's not whetting my appetite at all, and move on to the next one. So just because it says 2 sides, it doesn't have to be. Academic CVs, there's no way you get that onto 2 sides of an A4. If you're in an interim roles and an employer needs to know some of the projects you've worked on, you're going to struggle to get that on 2 sides of an A4. If you're in a senior appointment or senior role, an exec role, it's likely it's going to be a bit longer than that, because you need to demonstrate more information, more facts, more figures, or whatever it might be. Ideal world scenario in most cases is if you can try and aim for 2 sides, but you talked about the standard CV earlier, Simon, and just because you've got to tailor your CV, even if your sort of standard CV pre-tailoring is 3 sides long, what you've got to remember is you're probably going to be removing some of that information to highlight the key points. So if it goes on to 2 sides or 2.5 sides, as long as it's not like the layout is tidy and it's not kind of half a sentence on one page and half a sentence on another, ideally, then it's all good.
I've seen some really good CVs destroyed by people trying to get them to 2 sides. So they either take out all the white space, and white space is really important in CV. And so that all gets taken out to start with. So your bullet points don't have a blank line before them or after them, and everything's crammed up. And if that hasn't worked, then they'll go, okay, well, we'll go down to font size 9 instead of 11, and they'll just play with the font size. And you get the CV. It's hard to read. It's unpleasant to look at. You talk to anyone in advertising, they'll talk about the power of white space. Talk to anyone at Apple and you'll understand the power of white space. Just go and have a look at their website. But then when you start getting to make the font smaller to try to hit that 2-page limit, it just makes it an unpleasant read. It makes it difficult to work through. It makes it difficult to find the important stuff. And your job as a CV writer is to fulfill the requirements of your reader, not fulfill your requirements of your career coach or something you've seen on the web or anything else. And when you are looking at a large number of CVs, and they are lessening now, but in some markets, I'm sure there's still loads, you want to be the guy who's written the CV that people actually pick up and go, that I found what I wanted to. So consistent structure as well. So people get to learn where you are putting information. So if they want to know what the skills were that you applied in a certain role, they know that that's in the first 2 bullet points under each role. So they just go and pull it out. They know what they want. And what you need to do is make what they want available to them very, very simply and straightforwardly. Cramming, small fonts, 2-page limits. I really do think it's more damaging to a CV to worry about. So Becky's absolutely right. Get the rules right. Your CV will be the right length.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's really, really important. The other thing that really bugs me, and I put posts up there, and they get crickets. To be honest, they're not particularly attractive to my audience, so I apologise for that. This belief that a CV, on average, is either accepted or rejected in 6 seconds, the dreaded 6 second rule. What's your view of that, Becky?
Yeah, another thing, if you read it often enough, you believe it to be true. So basically, the bottom line is recruiters, hiring managers, talent acquisition staff, whoever's screening your CV will skim read your CV. That is a fact. So, like I said earlier, you won't have your CV read from top to bottom, no matter how frustrating that makes you feel, because you spent hours on it, days on it. It's about getting to the key information more quickly. Whether it's 6 seconds, 8 seconds, 20 seconds, it's just not long. And so that's why it's important to have the format of your CV so it's easy to navigate to get the key points that you want someone to see quickly, what your audience needs to see, and obviously with bullet points, making sure they are bullets rather than long-winded paragraphs per bullet as well. Because as soon as you've got too much text, people switch off. And again, like I said right at the beginning, consider your own behaviors. With the 2008 was the crazy time when the internet went mad, social media went mad, and all of a sudden overnight our attention span reduced. I can't remember the stats because I'm forgotten that, but I know they reduced way low to what they were before. So we're all looking for the quickest solution. So think like that, and make sure that you consider that when you're creating your CV. So it's not long, whether it's 6 seconds or not. I'm sure I take a bit longer than that, but it isn't much longer.
And I think what people do is they don't necessarily at the end of 6 or 8 seconds make the final decision.
Yeah.
They make a decision to invest another 6 or 8 seconds.
To read on.
So they're
It's just
reading,
that initial review.
and
Yeah.
you need to think about writing your CV in those kind of chunks. I
Yes.
often talk about the sort of EastEnders moment. You need to encourage people to work their way. Yeah, that's terrible. That you need to encourage people to work their way through the CV, whether they're reading from top to bottom and scanning, or they're doing what eye tracking software tells us people does as well. Go to the left-hand column, work down, look at the job title, look at the employer, go down a bit more, look at the job title, maybe look at a couple of bullet points.
Yeah.
Either way, construct your CV that in such a way that you're getting key information across every 6 or 8 seconds. And I think that's important. I've got one question on bullets. So I'll just mention that before we go and talk about graduate CVs, which is that's a webinar in itself, I suspect. But in terms of the question, how many bullet points are considered for each job? There's a golden rule that any copywriter will tell you, and that is that if you are creating a list of any kind of bullet, it's an odd number. So it's either 3 or 5. In my book, it's 3 or 5. More than 5, it's too long. So I would go for 3 or 5. The eye likes a center point. So it likes to be able to go somewhere that is the middle of what it's looking at. So if you go to 3 or 5, that odd number gives it a central point, and that rest of the eye will then work up and down from that point. So, and to answer the question, in my view, there are other things that are important about bullets. So, as Becky said, keep them short, including evidential data, a number if you possibly can, because they're so powerful. Keep them consistent, both in terms of format and in terms of length. So, if you're aiming for one-line bullets, try to keep them all to one line. If two lines is fine. And as Becky said, I put a post up earlier this week, and I think the bit I said at the start is that if your bullet points are more than 2 lines, then they're not a bullet point. They're just a small paragraph with a dot at the front. And you've lost all the power that magical thing that a bullet point has in terms of attracting the human eye. So I actually scribbled down somewhere, but in my panic over volume, I've lost it. But I promised I would go through the 7 rules of bullet points, and I've forgotten a couple of them. I'll come back maybe if I hear it later. Graduates, have you done a lot of work with graduates, Becky?
I have worked with graduates. I wouldn't say I've done copious amounts of work with graduates. So yeah, I do have an early careers section on my website, which has a graduate CV format, as well as the first time I've ever written a CV format as well, as in a school leaver. And I've got lots of experience in that because I've got 2 children and 3 stepchildren, all of 4 of which are post-school leaving age, and they're in jobs. So I've supported them. So lots of experience there. So how would one CV stand out to a graduate school committee? So I'm assuming that's it's not really a graduate, is it? It's a
Is that applying for higher education? Is that going that way? So is it from school to higher education? Maritza, if you can just come back and just
Just to get a
explain,
bit more
yeah,
clarification on
what
it, so we don't
stage
go off on a tangent.
you're at,
Yeah.
so that we can understand that. I mean, so the worst thing that ever happened to me was my eldest son looking for work.
Mm.
Being a job search coach and having an unemployed son around the house is incredibly damaging to your credibility. And I let
Poor,
him
poor
roll with
son.
it. You know, as we all know, we've been there, and or we're on our way to get there. Children are never going to listen to parents if they can possibly avoid it. And it took me some time before I eventually got involved. But the one thing I would say about early stage CVs, I'm not sure about Maritza's question if it is about how do you use a CV to get
Applying for
into
graduate schools for
applying for graduate
programs.
schools. We can talk on that, but the one thing you just have to bear in mind if you are, and it's probably relevant in terms of graduate school programs as well, but it's certainly if you are a graduate going for your first role, you're being hired on potential. You're not being hired on exclusively on who you are today and what you did yesterday. You're being hired on who they think you are going to be over a period of time.
Yeah.
Any sort of graduate program is an expensive exercise for an organization. They're looking for return on investment, so they're looking for potential.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there has to be an even stronger storyline in a graduate CV.
Yeah.
So you need to explain why want to go where you want to go, why you're going to get there, and what you've done in the past to enable you to get there. And it's that joining up those bits of based on potential is really, really important. Can you help Maritza at all in the stage before that?
Um, I think it's understand. You would have done some sort of coursework, some project work, to to build some of that life experience and that actual experience itself. And I think it's extracting what you've done project related wise, the part you played, the impact that you had, and the value that you added. It's still the same concept. It's just not maybe done in a work environment.
Yeah,
It's done
yeah,
in a educational academic environment. You can see on the format of the CV on my website under the early careers section, there is an HR graduate format CV in there that might give you some inspiration around maybe relating that to your background and your experience, and you could perhaps apply the same philosophy as that was created. You're absolutely right, Simon. All you have is potential, but you have to. It's about showing what you've done that makes you gives you the sort of extra. So how have you gone above and beyond to enable, to increase your learning, self-development, volunteering,
yeah,
putting your hand up for a project, anything like that that shows an attitude, because they're going to be looking for someone that's going to be dedicated. They don't want to hear the word dedicated, and that's another conversation, isn't it,
yeah. Please.
about cliches, because we need to prove our capabilities rather than give a long list of words that mean nothing, which is what a lot of job seekers do in their profile section. So it's the same concept. It's no different. It's just that we overthink it sometimes because we think we haven't got enough experience. It's life experience, academic experience. It's the same when you're creating a CV and you've been in, you're older like me. I've got hobbies. I've got I do things in my spare time. I read lots of books. I've got positive career advice. That's all over and above what I do in my day-to-day job. We forget transferable skills, opportunities to demonstrate attitude, soft skills, which are even more important in today's world and the future of work as we become more technology enabled. And particularly if you're in leadership and customer facing and people orientated roles, those soft skills are so important. So think about those aspects. We forget so much because we take so much for granted.
I
Sometimes
think that,
it's good to talk that through with people as well, so that they can highlight some of those areas that you might have forgotten or put to one side and think they're not as important as they really are.
And whether you're a graduate, early career stage, or later in your writing CV, one thing that I always suggest that people do is they write to somewhere in the region of 10 people who know them. So either teachers or colleagues at school, or the person who ran the corner shop that you did your newspaper around for, or someone you have reported to or has reported to you, and ask them to send back 3 statements that they think describe you, but limit those statements to 10 words. So the most you're going to get back from anyone is 30 words. But you're looking for other people's language. You're looking for other people's lenses view of you and it's incredibly informative. And it also gets away from the nervousness that a lot of people feel about being overly complimentary about themselves in their CVs.
Yeah.
They're using language that's been given to them. I always suggest that you use third person. I always find it easier to say Simon is brilliant than I'm brilliant. I never say either of those, to be honest. But if I did, that's what I'd find it easier to talk about someone else. But if you can collect other people's language and then look for the themes, look for what other people think of you. But that point about transferable skills, so many of the younger people I've worked with um, don't acknowledge or don't recognize the value of some of the stuff they do,
Yeah.
because it's stuff they do and they've done it for ages. But often it involves communication skills, or it involves leadership or management or organization. And if you have ever been anything, say in a club, and you were re-elected, that's really important. Same as if you're a contractor. Don't say that you were a contractor at ABC Limited for a year if you had your contract renewed 3 times. Get that renewal in. Show people have approved of you after they've seen you really close up, and that's really, really important too.
And headhunted. Let's not
And
forget that. And that gets missed as
absolutely,
well. Even if
yeah,
it's internal and
yeah.
you've been asked to, please, why don't you consider this job? It's coming up and I think you'd be great for it. That's because someone has given you the rubber stamp to say, do you know what? You're good at that. You're great at that. You've got the skills. And again, make sure you're using those words within your CV, because again, that gives reassurance. Big thing with employers. Give them reassurance that you have the capabilities, and like you say, you've got the credibility. Employers are, regardless of talent shortages, um, lots of employers, when you think about the future of work, the jobs that you might be applying for today will not look the same in however long time, and it obviously that time lapse between change and evolution of a role has shortened, because things change more quickly and more frequently now, because technology makes that happen. So when hiring managers are hiring, they're not just looking at you for today, they're looking at your potential for tomorrow. And that's in their mind. If you put yourself in the shoes of a hiring manager, that's quite a risk, because you're looking for something you don't know yet. You don't know whether they are capable yet. So think about adding reassuring language, that credibility, as Simon mentioned. Using my contract was extended 3 times whilst I was working for X company. I was headhunted into this role. um, Getting LinkedIn um, uh, recommendations, again, to reinforce your message, maybe even adding a statement in your CV from your current boss or previous boss about something that would add value, that would give reassurance again about a comment they made about you, that gives you that credibility. So all of those things make the receiving person who's looking at it feel good and feel like, oh phew, that looks good, that sounds like this person is who they say they are and someone else has endorsed it. So
And credibility definitely comes from saying that you're headhunted. It also comes from saying that you're a referral hire. So
yeah,
someone who had worked with you before recommended that employer to come and talk to you about a role.
yeah,
That's really powerful as well. And you can always get permission to mention that in an interview, not on your CV, but you can actually name the individual in an interview if you get permission to do it. It's a webinar on its own, but cliches is one of my big hang-ups. Um, the one thing that I have seen so many times, and it probably bugs me more than anything else, is in that personal statement, people telling me that they're honest and hardworking. I've been doing this for a long, long time. I've read a lot of CVs. I've never ever seen anyone say I'm lazy and dishonest. So saying that you're hardworking and honest actually means nothing, because the opposite is never in a CV. So rather than saying it, show it. So if you're hardworking, talk about in one of your bullet points, in some of your evidential data, evidence how hard you work. Talk about the hours, talk about working at weekends, whatever it is, and let people know that you're hard work. Don't just say these things, they roll off the tongue. And so many personal statements, or what we call solution statements, are just a link up of this string of complimentary phrases that could come off a thesaurus. Say nice things about me. There you go. That's all the stuff I'm going to say. Actually evidence it. Talk about why you're a great project manager or how you have been collaborative. Don't just say I'm a collaborative project manager. It doesn't mean much, because people know whether you use first, third, or third person, you're likely to have written it yourself unless you paid someone to, you won't go there again, but you paid someone to write a
We don't
CV.
like things. I can tell if someone's
Yeah,
had someone write a CV for them very often, and I'd rather someone else write it. Can I just add one more thing that I've just thought about that's
yeah.
important that many job seekers miss out, is context.
Mhm.
I said the word reassurance. I really do mean that. So, for example, we we basically write our CVs and we put a company name, bearing in mind the millions of companies that are out there worldwide, and we assume that an employer knows the nature of their business, how big the size of the company is, what their turnover is, whether they're award winning, whether they're investors in people, ISO accredited. We assume that they might know how big the team is that we manage, the context of the role in terms of turnover, our budgets, and our responsibilities. That's why the first few lines before you go into the bullet points, and again, first few, and I'm stressing few because we don't want a big paragraph. Again, you need to make sure you add context in there and relatability to the job you're applying for. So if, for example, you're applying for a organization that's within telecoms and you've worked with a telecoms related organization, don't just assume because you've mentioned a company name they're going to know that, and you have worked with them. Tell them, and also maybe explain the size of the organization and the connection there, so that you're adding more relatability. Because it's not just about what you do, it's not about just the job, it's about the fit. It's about culturally, are you going to fit into my organization? And we just need to put ourselves in the shoes of the hiring manager to think about what kind of things would reassure me that you're the right person I want to see in the interview process. So think about some of those relatable information. Don't assume anything. There's a saying that goes with that, but don't assume. Tell, inform,
Yeah.
so that you are conveying the accurate information to give them that reassurance.
I think Craig has just opened a whole can of worms smack on the hours section. So I think what Craig is talking about here is when I was talking about being honest and hardworking, and that those now demonstrate, if that is expected of someone, not the honesty bit, but maybe the hardworking bit, is that demonstrative of a toxic behaviour. I think that's what you're meaning, Craig. What I was going to say is we are up just about up on the hour. I'm not just going to skip this and go, actually, that's a difficult question. But I will come back. Do you have thoughts about that, Becky?
I need a bit more clarification on what
Yeah.
Craig means from it. Just a bit more context around that. I don't know, Craig, if you can just add a little bit more. I'm okay for a few minutes, Simon, if you are. So, Craig, if you could just add in a little bit more. You're probably typing away, and we're just waffle on in the background.
There's a gap. There's a 14-second lapse or anything that's
Yeah.
on LinkedIn Lives, and it stop us saying bad words or anything like that, I guess. I think one point that I would make is, as you're constructing your CV, think about the power of the first sentence of your solution statement or your personal statement. Think about the power and relevance of your first bullet points. It is really worth thinking about ordering those bullet points by relevance, particularly as you are beginning to move from a base or generic CV into those tailored CVs, because people will often need to have that little bit of a carrot to keep on reading through your CV. So that first sentence is really important. And one thing I've seen, and I now suggest, it wasn't my idea, but I now suggest, is when you look at a CV, there are some areas, we talk about resume real estate, so there are areas of a CV that have higher value than others. So your bottom right-hand corner is worth very little compared with your top left-hand corner. And yet the most valuable part has the stuff that no one's going to hire you for, which is your phone number, your email, and your name. And I know they have to go there, but then the next bit down is very, very important. And taking that up with a large, bold statement of personal statement or what is a waste. And what I have seen, and I think it works, and it works in terms of SEO with an ATS, and it works with the human being as well, is to actually use the generic job title of the role that you're applying for instead of your profile, instead of solution statement. It just confirms at a psychological level right at the beginning that you are what they are looking for. And it
I
will
think
arrive at that time.
I would agree with that. And I had that on one of the examples of the CV that you can download. But I think it's relevant in certain circumstances and not so relevant in others. I think if you're changing careers, it
Yeah.
might look a little bit forced and
Yeah.
not quite accurate. So,
Yeah.
and that's why you need the transferable skills as sort of the key thing that they see, and then some evidence underneath as to how you can back those skills up in terms of accomplishments as well. But it
And that's
definitely has a place.
but that's I mean that is so important, that the overriding rule for your CV is just don't lie.
Yeah.
And be honest. If you are changing careers and you're pivoting, be really honest. Some of the stuff I see on online kind of implies that hiring managers and HR people and recruiters are actually really stupid, and they can't read between the lines, and they can't add up different facts as they work their way down a CV. Generally, I find that hiring managers are more intelligent than me. I find that recruiters are often more committed than many people I meet. I'd like to not say me, but many people I meet. So they have skills, and we need to treat them with respect. And they will see if there is an inconsistency running through your CV, or more importantly, if it's reflected in your LinkedIn profile. So those consistencies, I think we're going to have hopefully going to have a guy on later in this series to talk around navigating the pre-employment screening process. Because once you've got through that, you have PES to deal with and referencing, etc. So yeah, consistency is important.
It is, and I think just a final point on that probably would be that if you're looking to pivot your career or change your career, throwing yourself into fully online applying for jobs is not necessarily the best time well spent. And that's why networking is important, because you're instantly up against competition potentially, whereby someone with someone's done the job before. And I've heard many stories and many success stories of people that have secured jobs, maybe sometimes applying online, but they've also been networking. So people have got to know them as a person, rather than or people know people that know people kind of thing, as how networking tends to work, rather than relying solely on applying for jobs. That's why building relationships, similarly, if you're transitioning out of the forces, finding a mentor that's done the same as you are intending to do can give you so much wisdom and insight, and also put you in touch with different people to help you on that journey. Everything I've done in my career, I could never sit there and say I've done it on my own. I've always done it with the help of others. And anything I do in the future that's worth anything will always be done like we're doing today. Me and Simon working together today will always be done with the benefit of working with other people. So it then alleviates that soul journey as well, doesn't it?
And networking is so crucial almost for any type of job. The one thing that I've been worried about over the last 12 months is that networking has almost now been replaced by LinkedIn. Networking is LinkedIn plus 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 plus. So there's a lot of other things that you need to be doing to effectively network.
Yeah.
LinkedIn is really important. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. And getting LinkedIn right is really important. And getting your activity on LinkedIn right is really important. But it's not the be all and end all of networking. So there are groups and things well outside of that standard LinkedIn environment. So think about how else you can meet relevant people, how you can find those mentors. That's exactly the thinking behind Next Steps. The thing behind Next Steps is that we want to be able to provide people with multi-lens mentoring over a long period of time to give them that view of experience that they haven't yet had. And I think that's really, really important.
Absolutely.
I don't think Craig got back.
No.
So if you want to have a chat about toxic behaviours, Greg, and particularly if it was about my comment about hardworking and dishonest or honest, I'm more than happy to have that chat. Just let me know. I'd just like to say thank you, Becky. It's always a pleasure, and I've been scribbling down notes and typing with my two fingers to capture as much as I can as well. The recording will go up. It'll be on my profile before the end of today, probably in the next half an hour or so. Becky, I'll send you a link, so if you want to put it up on yours.
Yeah, I've been asked a couple of times for a few people to see it, so
Brilliant.
I
Okay, so I'll send you that link. I'll get it from either Restream or LinkedIn very quickly.
Thank you.
And it'll also, a couple of things I just want to mention. Next Friday, the next Best on the Web mastermind, a masterclass is coming from a lady called Helen dos Santos, who is just incredible. I want to get the description right. The event is called The Power of Positive Thought. She'll be running a number of positive thought events through the session. I've seen her do things that I still don't. I wrote in a comment this morning. I'm still bamboozled by some of the stuff that she does. I don't know how it works, but it does work. There's one particular thing she does where you hold a polo on a piece of cotton, and depending what you're thinking, the polo changes direction. I don't understand how that works. It does, and I've seen it done with 70 soldiers. So that's at 1:00 next Friday. So watch out for that. There is also the Best on the Web group on LinkedIn, where we are beginning to put up tools and guidance, and there'll always be information about the other masterclasses we're running over the next 2 or 3 months. So I'll pop that up. I did have this lovely sort of PowerPoint slide that was going to go up now, but I hadn't.
Who's going to hear you?
So you just put it up. So I've learned something, and life is a learning curve. I've learned today that you can't put up those as backgrounds and expect to speak at the same time. So I apologise for that slight false start. It's been great. I've really enjoyed it. I do love doing these things with you, Becky. Thank you very, very much indeed. And I will be putting up links to obviously to Becky's website and to Becky's LinkedIn profile in the group and in the events and on my own profile. So you'll be able to get in touch with her however you need to. But absolutely get to Positive Career Advice. It's a fantastic website. I love it.
Thank you. And I would just add one more thing. Firstly, two more things. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I always enjoy running these sessions with you, or you running them, and I attend. Brilliant, love it. And the time goes so quickly. And the one final note is I do have 2 webinars next week, which are free for job seekers on CVs. So obviously very relevant, and also optimizing your LinkedIn profile as well. So if you go to the website, go to the webinar page, you'll be able to book a space there. And if you are there and you are attending, I look forward to seeing you then. It's Tuesday and Wednesday, I think, from memory. So there we go.
The indication of how good those webinars are the number of other career coaches and job search coaches that you get attending them as well.
I know, they do.
we all learn from you, Becky. Becky, the other thing that Becky hasn't touched on is she's Ops Director of Tate, which is a part of Impellum, and has had this stellar career within recruitment as well. So Becky's one of those people who has done it. She literally has the T-shirt. So a lot of Becky will often say that job search coaching, career advice is opinion based, but Becky's opinions have real value because they're based in real experience over an extended period of time. And whenever she has a doubt about that, she goes off and does the research and comes back with real strong data. So it's brilliant to have Becky on. I would suggest that anyone who is watching today follows her and goes and has a look at Positive Career Advice. It's fantastic. positivecareeradvice.com. Thanks very much to everyone. We'll be back again next Friday. I'm really grateful for your time, and I'm sorry.